The Galactic Council chamber was vast, its golden walls reflecting the eerie glow of 1,000 hovering data screens. Representatives of countless species sat in towering seats, their forms ranging from insectoid to reptilian, from gelatinous to metallic. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Daniel Carter, the lone human in the hall, his face a mask of barely contained frustration. "The Xel'Thar will not stop," he warned, his voice firm. "They have already consumed 3 sectors. They do not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. Every species they encounter, wiped out, without exception." A deep, guttural laugh echoed from the far end of the chamber. High Chancellor Gorvac, a towering 4-armed warlord from the Krell Dominion, leaned forward, his crimson eyes glinting with amusement. "And what do you suggest, human? That the Council places its faith in your kind?" He scoffed. "You are but children compared to the elder races. Your people have barely stepped beyond their own system." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Vortani, with their translucent, shifting forms, shimmered in disdain. The cybernetic Olan let out a series of sharp beats, laughter in their machine tongue. The Xel'Thar had already decimated powerful empires. What chance did humanity, the upstart species, truly have? Daniel's fingers curled into fists at his sides, but he kept his voice calm. "We have fought wars before. Wars we were never meant to win." His blue eyes swept over the assembled leaders, meeting their skepticism with steel. "And yet we did." The Council Elder, an ancient being of pure energy encased in an armored exosuit, finally spoke, its voice a hollow whisper. "The Council has already decided. The other species shall prepare defenses at key sectors. But humanity, you will not be given a seat in this war." Daniel felt his pulse thunder in his ears. "You would leave us to fight alone. You were never invited to fight at all." Gorvac sneered. The words burned, but Daniel had expected nothing less. Humanity had always been underestimated, dismissed as reckless, as brash, as insignificant. But none of these council members had ever studied Earth's history. None of them knew what happened when humanity was left with no choice but to fight. He turned without another word, stepping out of the chamber. The moment the doors sealed behind him, his personal communicator buzzed. He tapped the device on his wrist. "Go ahead," he said. A tense voice responded. "Sir, the Xel'Thar have just appeared in the Titan Reach system. Fleet formation is unlike anything we've seen before." Daniel inhaled sharply. Titan Reach, a human-controlled sector. The attack had begun. He strode toward the waiting transport, already issuing orders. Scramble every available fleet, full mobilization, and send a message to the High Chancellor. He paused for a moment, then allowed himself a cold smile. "Tell him that when this is over, we'll see who deserves a seat in this war." Far away, in the void of space, something vast and unnatural tore into reality. The Xel'Thar fleet arrived in perfect formation, their ships black as night, jagged as broken glass. Their weapons hummed with unnatural energy. They had conquered countless worlds without resistance. This time, however, they would face something new, something they had never encountered before. They would face humanity. The void of space trembled as the Xel'Thar fleet descended upon Titan Reach. Their warships were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Black, angular constructs that seemed to drink in the light around them. Their arrival was not preceded by radio transmissions, diplomatic envoys, or demands for surrender. They simply appeared, an overwhelming force of destruction, moving with eerie precision toward the human colony below. On board the UHS Valkyrie, Admiral James Holloway stood at the command deck, his sharp gaze locked onto the fleet display. Red markers spread like a virus across the holographic projection, countless enemy ships encroaching upon their defenses. Titan Reach's orbital stations had already begun emergency evacuations, ferrying civilians to any available transport. But there was no time. The Xel'Thar were not coming to conquer. They were coming to exterminate. Holloway exhaled slowly, his grip tightening around the metal railing. Open a channel to all fleet captains. A soft chime confirmed the connection. Across the system, the captains of 27 human warships listened. They were outnumbered nearly 5-1. The Council had abandoned them. No reinforcements were coming. This was humanity's first true test in a war against a species that had never known defeat. "This is Admiral Holloway," he said, his voice calm, unyielding. "We are alone. The Council thinks we're weak. The Xel'Thar think we're prey. They expect us to fight like the others, to retreat, to kneel." He let the silence linger before delivering his final words. "Show them what it means to stand against humanity." A single command echoed through the fleet: "Engage." The first human ships surged forward, engines flaring. Titan Reach's planetary defenses activated, launching a volley of railgun rounds and missile swarms toward the incoming invaders. The sky above the colony ignited with the chaotic dance of battle: beams of plasma, kinetic slugs, and nuclear detonations rippling through the void. The Xel'Thar responded with terrifying efficiency. Their ships moved in perfect synchronization, weaving through the firestorm with unnatural precision. Sapphire beams lanced out from their warships, slicing through 2 human frigates instantly. Explosions blossomed in the distance, and the UH Tempest was torn apart, its crew lost in an instant. Holloway clenched his jaw. This was exactly what they expected: humanity crumbling under superior force. But they had underestimated the one thing that made humans different: adaptability. The Xel'Thar fought like a machine, cold and calculated. Humanity fought like survivors. "Execute Pattern Omega," Holloway commanded. Across the battlefield, human ships broke formation in an unpredictable spiral, their movements chaotic, reckless. It was unlike anything the Xel'Thar had ever seen. Their algorithms struggled to track the erratic flight paths, their precision strikes missing more than they hit. And then humanity struck back. Stealth corvettes slipped between enemy lines, unleashing EMP bursts that disabled Xel'Thar shields. Missile frigates coordinated their fire, targeting weak points in the alien armor. Carriers released squadrons of drone fighters that swarmed enemy ships, overwhelming their targeting systems. And then came the boarding teams. Elite human marines, equipped with exosuits and magnetic boots, launched from assault pods, slamming into the hulls of Xel'Thar ships. Plasma cutters spliced through enemy airlocks, and within moments, the war spilled into the corridors of the alien vessels. Sergeant Elias Ward led his squad into the unknown, their rifles raised. The Xel'Thar warriors were monstrous up close, tall, insectoid beings with obsidian exoskeletons and multi-jointed limbs. They screeched as they charged, their weapons crackling with dark energy. But the humans did not waver. Gunfire erupted. The narrow corridors became a battleground of steel and blood. Ward's squad moved with ruthless efficiency, using cover, teamwork, and sheer aggression to push forward. The Xel'Thar had never fought an enemy that refused to break. For the first time in their history, they experienced something unfamiliar: resistance. Hours passed, the battle raging across space and steel. Human ships burned, but they did not flee. Xel'Thar warships fell, but they did not retreat. Titan Reach trembled as the war waged on, and in the cold abyss of the void, something changed. For the first time, the Xel'Thar hesitated. For the first time, humanity proved they were not prey. They were predators. The Galactic Council chamber was silent, save for the flickering holograms of war reports hovering above the central days. The gathered representatives of the elder species stared at the unfolding battle, their expressions unreadable. No one had expected this outcome. No one had believed that humanity, young, reckless, undisciplined, would last more than a few hours against the Xel'Thar. Yet here they were. High Chancellor Gorvac of the Krell Dominion leaned forward, his 4 clawed fingers tapping against the armrest of his throne-like seat. His crimson eyes narrowed as another Xel'Thar warship was torn apart by human forces. "This was not supposed to happen," he muttered. Their tactics are unpredictable, murmured the Vortani delegate, their translucent form shifting uneasily. They fight with no discernible pattern, no order. A deep rumbling voice came from the far end of the chamber. They fight like cornered beasts. The speaker was Lord Ulzeri of the Draconar, a species of reptilian warriors who had once considered themselves the most brutal fighters in the galaxy. Now, as he watched humans rip through the Xel'Thar forces, he was no longer certain. The Council Elder, the ancient being of energy encased in an armored shell, finally spoke. The Xel'Thar fleet was expected to wipe them out in a single assault. Instead, humanity is adapting. Its voice, like the whisper of dying stars, carried across the chamber. This war is not proceeding as calculated. Gorvax scoffed. Then we must act. His voice was firm, decisive. If humanity wins this battle, they will gain influence. They will demand a seat in this council. And if they continue to prove their strength. He let the words linger, the unspoken fear settling upon the gathered leaders. For centuries, the Galactic Council had maintained its power by ensuring the balance of war and peace. The older races held dominion, dictating the fate of younger species. Humanity's unexpected resistance was more than just a military anomaly. It was a threat to the established order. The Vortani delegate spoke cautiously. Are you suggesting we intervene? Gorvak's lips curled into a cold smile. Not openly. Not yet. But there are ways to ensure humanity does not rise too quickly. As the council deliberated in the shadows, unaware that history itself was shifting, humanity continued to fight for survival. On board the HFY Valkyrie, Admiral Holloway stood amidst the chaos of the command deck, barking orders as the battle above Titan Reach raged on. The Xel'Thar had lost nearly half their fleet, but they refused to retreat. Even wounded, they fought with a relentless, machine-like efficiency. And then, without warning, something changed. The incoming fire from the Xel'Thar fleet began to dwindle. Their formations shifted, their movements no longer perfectly synchronized. Holloway narrowed his eyes as he studied the tactical display. They're hesitating. A junior officer turned from their station, confusion etched across their face. Sir, I'm detecting multiple energy signatures entering the system. Non-Xel'Thar ships. Holloway's stomach twisted. Reinforcements. No, sir. The officer's voice was hesitant. They're council ships. The holo display flickered, revealing a new fleet emerging from hyperspace. Sleek, golden vessels bearing the insignia of the Galactic Council surrounded the battlefield. But they did not open fire. They simply watched. A transmission came through, and the image of a familiar figure appeared. Ambassador Daniel Carter, his face grim. Admiral, we have a problem. The Council has declared an emergency sanction against human military expansion. Holloway felt a slow, burning anger rise in his chest. What the hell does that mean? Carter's jaw tightened. It means they are cutting us off. No trade, no resources, no support. They are blocking any allied fleets from coming to our aid. He exhaled sharply. They want us to lose. A heavy silence settled over the command deck. The Xel'Thar, despite their losses, still held an advantage in numbers. Humanity had fought harder than anyone expected, but now they were alone in the truest sense. No reinforcements were coming. No supplies would replenish their dwindling ammunition. Holloway turned to his officers, his voice low but firm. Then we make sure they regret this. A battle cry erupted across the human fleet. The Council had turned its back on them. But humanity had never needed permission to survive. With fire in their hearts and steel in their hands, they prepared for war. The sky above Titan Reach burned with the fury of war. Explosions rippled through the void, human and Xel'Thar warships locked in a brutal struggle. The planet's orbital defenses flickered under the relentless assault, their automated cannons spewing railgun fire and missile swarms at the enemy. But there were too many dark, jagged Xel'Thar ships slicing through space like hungry predators. And now, with the Galactic Council's betrayal, humanity had nowhere left to turn. On the bridge of the HFY, Admiral Holloway stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze unwavering as the battle unfolded before him. Every decision he made carried the weight of billions of lives. The Council had abandoned them, cutting off supply lines, isolating them from potential allies, leaving them to be slaughtered. But if the Council thought humanity would break, they had gravely miscalculated. "Status report," Holloway commanded. A weary officer, face smeared with sweat and soot, glanced up from her console. "We've lost 8 ships. The ironclad is taking heavy fire. We're down to 30% of our missile reserves, and our railguns are overheating." Holloway's jaw tightened. They were running out of time. He turned to the holo display, scanning the battlefield. The Xel'Thar were pressing harder, their relentless advance closing around Titan Reach like a noose. If they broke through, the colony would be wiped out. Millions of men, women, and children gone. He refused to let that happen. He tapped his communicator. "All fleet captains, this is Holloway. We are initiating the Phoenix Protocol." A silence settled over the bridge. Everyone knew what that meant. It was a desperation maneuver, one designed for wars humanity was never meant to win. A strategy that turned weakness into a weapon. Across the fleet, human ships suddenly changed formation. Instead of maintaining defensive lines, they scattered, weaving through the battlefield in unpredictable patterns. Some ships powered down their main weapons entirely, diverting all energy to engines. Others lurked in the debris field, silent and waiting. To the Xel'Thar, it must have seemed like madness, a complete collapse of human coordination. That was exactly the point. Xel'Thar warships pushed forward, sensing weakness, but as they did, hidden human strike teams activated. Stealth corvettes emerged from the debris, launching surprise attacks on isolated enemy vessels. Automated drone swarms, programmed to mimic wreckage, burst to life, overwhelming Xel'Thar targeting systems. Then, the suicide ships came. Old, decommissioned freighters, stripped of crew and loaded with nuclear warheads, ignited their engines at full burn, hurling themselves into the heart of the enemy fleet. The Xel'Thar barely had time to react before the first one detonated. A blinding sphere of white-hot destruction expanded through space, consuming a dozen enemy warships instantly. The shockwave rippled outward, sending others tumbling helplessly. And then another freighter hit, and another. The Xel'Thar fleet, once an unbreakable force, was suddenly in chaos. On the surface of Titan Reach, Commander Sarah Briggs stood atop the colony's primary defense bunker, watching the battle unfold above. Dust and smoke clung to her combat armor as the ground forces prepared for the worst. If the Xel'Thar broke through the orbital defense, they would descend upon the colony in full force. Her comm unit crackled to life. "Briggs, report." Admiral Holloway's voice came through, steady despite the chaos. "We're dug in," she responded, glancing over the trenches of soldiers, tanks, and artillery cannons stretching across the colony's outskirts. "But if those bastards make it past your fleet, we won't be able to hold them forever." "You won't have to," Holloway assured her. "They're going to break before we do." She wanted to believe that. She had to. A warning siren blared across the colony as something massive entered the planet's atmosphere. Briggs turned her gaze skyward just in time to see it. An enormous Xel'Thar warship, sleek and obsidian, descending from the heavens like an executioner's blade. "They're landing," a soldier whispered beside her, gripping his rifle tighter. Briggs exhaled sharply. "Then we dig in and make them bleed for every inch of this colony." The first Xel'Thar dropships crashed into the surface. Their doors hissed open, revealing towering, multi-limbed warriors, their insectoid bodies glistening under the colony's artificial sun. Their weapons crackled with an energy Briggs didn't recognize, but she didn't need to. She only needed to know one thing. "They aren't invincible," she muttered. Then, with a battle cry that echoed through the colony, humanity's defenders opened fire. The ground battle erupted in an instant. Artillery shells screamed across the battlefield, turning the once pristine colony outskirts into a storm of fire and smoke. Infantry squads took cover behind barricades, unloading round after round into the advancing enemy. The Xel'Thar moved with terrifying speed, their exoskeletal bodies shrugging off smaller rounds as they charged forward. But humans had never fought fair. As the first wave of Xel'Thar breached the trenches, hidden mines detonated beneath them, ripping apart their formations. Flamethrower units emerged from concealed bunkers, bathing the invaders in streams of liquid fire. Snipers picked off Xel'Thar commanders, disrupting their movements. Briggs herself charged into the fray, her combat knife sinking into the throat of a screeching Xel'Thar warrior. She wrenched the blade free, dodging a clawed limb that nearly took her head off. Rolling to the side, she grabbed a fallen shotgun, turned, and fired point-blank into the alien's chest. It collapsed, twitching, black ichor pooling around its broken form. A deep, unholy roar shook the battlefield. The Xel'Thar were enraged. For the first time in their history, they were facing an enemy that refused to break. Above, the space battle raged on. More human ships fell, but the Xel'Thar's numbers were dwindling faster. The Phoenix Protocol was working. Holloway watched as the enemy fleet, once a perfect war machine, was reduced to scattered, desperate fragments. The Xel'Thar had never known fear, but now, for the first time, they hesitated. Aboard the Xel'Thar command vessel, Supreme Warlord Xel'Thar observed the battle, his black eyes narrowing. His kind had annihilated countless civilizations, but this was different. The humans fought like no species he had ever encountered. They should have surrendered by now. They should have broken under superior firepower. Instead, they adapted. They struck back with unrelenting fury. A warning chime echoed through his ship's bridge. His second-in-command turned toward him, hesitant. Supreme Warlord, we are losing too many ships. We must consider a retreat. Xel'Thar bared his fangs. The thought was unthinkable. The Xel'Thar did not retreat. They conquered. They exterminated. And yet, on the battlefield, humanity stood unyielding. Even outnumbered, even battered and bloodied, they fought with a ferocity that should not have been possible. They fought as if defeat was not an option. Xel'Thar's clawed hand curled into a fist. The Xel'Thar had believed this war was over before it had begun. But now, as the flames of battle consumed the skies of Titan Reach, a single terrible realization dawned upon them. They had made a mistake that might cost them everything. The Xel'Thar had never known desperation. They had crushed countless civilizations, reduced empires to dust, and rewritten history with the blood of the weak. Their war doctrine was simple: overwhelm, annihilate, and move on. But now, for the first time in their species' history, they were the ones struggling to hold their ground. In the shattered orbit of Titan Reach, the once dominant Xel'Thar fleet was in chaos. Human warships, battered but unbroken, swarmed like relentless predators, exploiting every weakness, every hesitation. The Phoenix Protocol had turned the battle into a slaughter, not for humanity, but for their invaders. Admiral James Holloway stood firm on the bridge of the Valkyrie, his sharp eyes locked onto the tactical display. What had once been a hopeless battle had shifted into something else entirely. Xel'Thar vessels, once cold and methodical, were now erratic, disorganized. Their fleet was fracturing under the sheer unpredictability of humanity's assault. "Status report," he ordered, his voice calm despite the fires burning across his ship. Lieutenant Reyes wiped blood from a gash on his forehead and checked the latest readings. "Sir, enemy forces down to 36% capacity. Our stealth corvettes have taken out 3 more of their command vessels. Their fleet is losing cohesion." Holloway exhaled slowly. He had never seen the Xel'Thar break formation before. They fought like machines, devoid of hesitation. Until now. "Sir," another officer called out, Xel'Thar reinforcements just entered the system. Multiple warships inbound. Holloway's stomach clenched. Reinforcements. Of course, the Xel'Thar were wounded, but they weren't fools. They had called for backup. And now, with their numbers replenished, they would tighten their grip and finish what they had started. The bridge crew turned to Holloway, waiting for his command. There was no room for doubt. "We hold the line," he said firmly. "Alert all ships. This battle isn't over." Even as he spoke, he knew the truth. Their weapons were running low, their ships pushed to the brink. They had given the Xel'Thar the fight of their lives, but how much longer could they keep this up? On the surface of Titan Reach, Commander Sarah Briggs crouched behind a half-destroyed barricade, her rifle clutched tightly in her hands. Smoke and dust filled the air, the ground littered with the corpses of both human and Xel'Thar soldiers. The battle for the colony had devolved into brutal, close-quarters combat. The Xel'Thar had expected an easy conquest. Instead, they found themselves fighting street by street, building by building. Their towering forms, built for speed and precision, were ill-suited for the kind of raw, savage combat humanity had perfected. Briggs exhaled sharply as a group of Xel'Thar warriors charged toward her position. She squeezed the trigger, her rifle roaring to life. The first alien dropped, its carapace shattering under the impact. The second took a round to the throat and collapsed, twitching. The third made it within striking distance, its bladed limbs slashing through the air. Briggs ducked, rolling beneath its attack. In one fluid motion, she pulled the combat knife from her belt and drove it into the creature's eye socket. The alien shrieked and thrashed before finally going still. Blood dripped from her fingers as she stood. She had lost count of how many she had killed. It didn't matter. A voice crackled through her earpiece. "Commander Briggs, we're detecting massive energy signatures incoming. Enemy reinforcements inbound." Her breath caught in her throat. More were coming. And this time, they would not underestimate humanity. She turned to the exhausted soldiers around her, their faces smeared with dirt and blood. They had fought harder than anyone had expected, but how much more could they take? Briggs gritted her teeth. "No one falls back. We dig in. We fight." A soldier hesitated. "Ma'am, we're running out of." "I don't care," she snapped. "We fight until we can't. We hold this colony, no matter what." The soldiers exchanged glances, then nodded. And then the ground trembled. Xel'Thar dropships filled the sky, darkening the sun as they descended. Thousands of enemy warriors stormed the battlefield, their screeches piercing through the air. The ground battle had begun again, but this time it was worse. The Xel'Thar were done holding back. Briggs watched as towering war machines stomped across the battlefield, their energy cannons ripping through human defenses. New types of enemy soldiers emerged, larger, more heavily armored than the first waves. The Xel'Thar were adapting. They had learned. Humanity had won the first battle, but now the true war had begun. Back in orbit, Admiral Holloway stared at the growing Xel'Thar fleet. He knew what this meant. The enemy had realized their mistake, and now they had come to correct it. He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to all ships." A chime confirmed the fleet-wide transmission. Across every surviving warship, every desperate crew member listened. "This is Admiral Holloway," he began. "I know you're tired. I know you're bleeding. And I know the odds are against us." He let his words sink in before continuing. "But I also know who we are." The bridge crew stood straighter. Across the fleet, soldiers and pilots raised their heads. "We are humanity. We are the ones they thought would break. We are the ones they thought would kneel. But we are still here." The tension in the air shifted. It was no longer fear. It was something else. Something stronger. "They think this is the final blow," Holloway said. "But they don't understand. We don't fight for conquest. We don't fight for power. We fight because we refuse to die." The fleet erupted in a chorus of cheers and battle cries. Holloway's eyes hardened. We have one last maneuver left. One final strike before they can bring their full force to bear. If we fail, we lose everything. He turned to his officers. Execute Ragnarok. A hush fell over the bridge. Ragnarok was a final contingency plan. An all-out, no-holds-barred counterattack. Every ship, every soldier, every remaining resource would be thrown into one final assault. If it failed, humanity would be wiped from the stars. But if it succeeded, humanity would never be underestimated again. Orders were relayed, weapons primed, engines roared to life, and as the battered remnants of humanity's fleet turned toward the incoming Xel'Thar armada, one thing became clear. This was no longer just a battle for survival. This was a battle to decide the fate of the galaxy itself. The void trembled as humanity's fleet surged forward, battered but unyielding. The Ragnarok protocol had been activated. There was no turning back. Admiral James Holloway gripped the railing of the UHS Valkyrie, his gaze fixed on the looming Xel'Thar reinforcements. The alien warships were vast, their hulls glowing with energy signatures never seen before. These weren't just reinforcements. They were the Xel'Thar's warlords, the apex predators of their species, arriving to crush humanity once and for all. Holloway's lips curled into a grim smile. Let them come. All ships, prepare for full offensive engagement, he ordered. The Ragnarok maneuver was simple in theory but devastating in execution. Every human vessel would push forward at maximum thrust, crashing headfirst into the enemy fleet. Instead of defensive lines, the fleet would become a storm, a chaotic, unpredictable mass of destruction. Humanity could not outgun the Xel'Thar, but they could outfight them. Explosions flared in the distance as the first wave of human ships smashed into the alien fleet. Stealth corvettes slipped between the behemoth Xel'Thar cruisers, unleashing concentrated bursts of high-explosive rounds. Larger ships acted as moving shields, absorbing incoming fire while deploying squadrons of fighter drones in rapid strikes. On the bridge of the Valkyrie, Holloway clenched his fists. They were losing ships, but the Xel'Thar were bleeding too. Their previously perfect formations shattered under the sheer unpredictability of humanity's tactics. But it still wasn't enough. Holloway turned to his weapons officer. Are the RAF cannons charged? Almost, sir. 5 more minutes. They didn't have 5 minutes. Divert all auxiliary power. I want those cannons firing now. The officer hesitated but nodded, relaying the command. The Valkyrie's main batteries flared to life, unleashing beams of concentrated energy. The RAF cannons were humanity's last experimental weapons, designed to tear through even the strongest warships. The beams struck an enemy dreadnought dead center, its shields flickering before the ship ruptured, torn apart in a violent explosion. Holloway allowed himself a single nod. 1 down, hundreds to go. On the surface of Titan Reach, the battlefield had become a hellscape. Smoke and fire obscured the horizon, and the ground was slick with blood, both human and alien. Commander Sarah Briggs reloaded her rifle, her arms aching from endless combat. The Xel'Thar had sent their elite warriors now, monstrous creatures that towered over the battlefield, wielding weapons that tore through entire squads in an instant. She and her troops had fallen back to the last line of defense, the inner city. If the Xel'Thar broke through here, the colony would be lost. Briggs, a voice called over comms. It was Lieutenant Harris, stationed on a rooftop, his sniper rifle taking down enemies from above. We've got incoming. Big ones. Briggs looked up just in time to see the sky tear open. A massive Xel'Thar dropship descended, its underside opening like a monstrous mouth. Then it unleashed them. Titan-class Xel'Thar warriors. These creatures were unlike anything Briggs had faced before. Twice the size of a normal Xel'Thar, their exoskeletons thick as tank armor. Their weapons pulsed with a strange, golden energy. Briggs swallowed hard. Open fire, she screamed. The colony's last defenses erupted in gunfire. Tanks fired shell after shell. Rocket teams launched payloads. Snipers emptied their clips into the approaching behemoths. Nothing stopped them. Briggs watched in horror as one of the Titans waded through the gunfire, lifting a massive cannon and firing. A golden pulse of energy tore through an entire human platoon, disintegrating them in an instant. Damn it. Briggs activated her comms. "This is Commander Briggs. We need orbital support now." Static. Then Holloway's voice came through. "Briggs, we're engaged in heavy combat up here. I don't have the firepower to." Another blast from the Xel'Thar Titan slammed into a human artillery position, reducing it to rubble. "Then you better find some," Briggs snapped. "Because if we fall, you lose the planet." Silence. Then Holloway's voice, colder than steel. "Understood. Stand by." Back in orbit, Holloway turned to his tactical officer. "Do we have anything left?" The officer hesitated. "There's one option, sir, but it's not ready." Holloway's jaw tightened. "Explain." "The Hellfire Array. It was meant as a planetary deterrent, not a battlefield weapon. If we fire it now, we risk destroying half the colony along with the enemy." Holloway clenched his fists. The Hellfire Array was a last resort weapon, an orbital cannon that could glass a battlefield in an instant. If he used it, thousands of innocent people would die. But if he didn't, humanity lost everything. He took a deep breath. "Prepare to fire," he ordered. "Sir." "That's an order." The ship trembled as the Hellfire Array powered up. Holloway opened a channel to Briggs. "Get your people underground. You have 60 seconds. Briggs didn't argue. She switched her comms to colony-wide frequency. "All units, retreat. Underground bunkers. Now." The remaining human forces scrambled, pulling their wounded with them as they dove into the reinforced shelters beneath the colony. The Xel'Thar Titans, unaware of what was coming, pressed forward. Then the sky ignited. A beam of pure devastation lanced from orbit, striking the battlefield with the fury of a dying star. The ground cracked. Buildings melted. The Xel'Thar Titans, for all their power, were incinerated in an instant. When the firestorm finally cleared, the battlefield was unrecognizable, a charred wasteland where the Xel'Thar had once stood. Briggs coughed, emerging from the bunker, eyes scanning the wreckage. It had worked. The Titans were gone. The Xel'Thar ground forces had been obliterated. But at what cost? Her comms crackled. "This is Admiral Holloway," came the voice. "Report." Briggs exhaled. "We're alive." "Good," Holloway said. Then a pause. "The battle isn't over yet." Briggs frowned. "What do you mean?" Holloway's next words sent a chill through her spine. "The Xel'Thar flagship is still in orbit," he said. "And they're preparing something big." Briggs's stomach twisted. The war wasn't over. Not yet. And humanity's final battle was about to begin. The void above Titan Reach was no longer just a battlefield. It was a graveyard. Wreckage from both human and Xel'Thar warships drifted aimlessly, torn metal and shattered hulls floating through the abyss like the bones of ancient leviathans. Fires burned in the cold darkness, flickering remnants of a war that had pushed both sides to the edge of annihilation. And yet, the battle was not over. Admiral James Holloway stood rigid on the bridge of the UH Valkyrie, his eyes locked on the monstrosity before him. The Xel'Thar flagship. It was unlike anything humanity had faced before, a behemoth of living metal, pulsating with an eerie blue energy. It was no mere warship. It was a weaponized fortress, the beating heart of the Xel'Thar invasion. "Sir," Lieutenant Rice called, voice tense. "We're detecting a massive energy buildup from the flagship. If they fire, we won't survive it." Holloway exhaled slowly. He had expected this. The Xel'Thar were preparing their final blow, a planet-killer strike that would wipe Titan Reach from existence. Time until firing. 3 minutes, maybe less. A cold certainty settled over him. Humanity had fought too hard, sacrificed too much, to fall here. If they lost now, it wouldn't just be Titan Reach, it would be Earth next. All remaining ships, form up, Holloway ordered. We're going in. A ripple of shock passed through the bridge crew. Lieutenant Reyes hesitated. Sir, you're suggesting a direct assault. We barely have any firepower left. We have enough, Holloway cut him off. If we get close enough, we might be able to overload their core. That ship isn't just a weapon. It's alive. And just like any living thing, it can bleed. No more hesitation. Orders were relayed. Engines flared. The remnants of humanity's fleet, broken but not beaten, roared toward the Xel'Thar fortress. The final battle had begun. On the surface, Commander Sarah Briggs emerged from the rubble of Titan Reach, her rifle clutched tightly in her hands. The battlefield was eerily silent. The Xel'Thar ground forces had been wiped out in the Hellfire strike, but Briggs knew better than to believe they were truly defeated. She activated her comms. Admiral, what's the status? Holloway's voice crackled through the channel. The Xel'Thar flagship is charging a planet killer. We're making a final push. Briggs clenched her jaw. If that weapon fired, nothing on Titan Reach would survive. Not her, not her soldiers, not the civilians hidden in underground bunkers. There had to be something she could do. Then, something caught her eye. Movement near the wreckage of a downed Xel'Thar vessel. She signaled to her squad. Weapons ready. We've got company. They approached cautiously. From the smoking ruins of the alien craft, a figure emerged. It was unlike the other Xel'Thar. Taller, more imposing, its exoskeleton lined with glowing blue veins. A warlord. The Xel'Thar commander regarded her with cold, inhuman eyes. When it spoke, its voice was a distorted blend of tones, translated through her helmet's eye. You have fought well, human, but you will not survive what comes next. Briggs raised her rifle. Neither will you. Without warning, the warlord lunged. Briggs fired, but the creature was too fast. It slammed into her, knocking the weapon from her hands. She rolled with the impact, drawing her combat knife just as the warlord's bladed limbs slashed toward her. She ducked, barely avoiding decapitation. The creature was stronger, faster, but she was human, and humans didn't stop fighting. She feinted left, then drove the knife into the warlord's side. The alien shrieked, its ichor splattering across the ruins. But it wasn't enough. The warlord's claws raked across her armor, tearing through the plating and sending her sprawling. Pain flared through her side, but she forced herself to move. The warlord loomed over her, raising a spear-like appendage for the killing blow. Then, a gunshot. The warlord staggered. Briggs looked up to see Lieutenant Harris, sniper rifle smoking from the rooftop of a collapsed building. Briggs didn't hesitate. She surged forward, grabbing a fallen Xel'Thar blade and ramming it through the warlord's throat. The creature convulsed, then collapsed, lifeless. Breathing hard, she activated her comms. Enemy ground commander neutralized. Holloway's voice came through, strained but determined. Good, because we're out of time. In orbit, the Valkyrie dodged through the chaos, leading the charge toward the Xel'Thar flagship. The alien warship loomed ahead, its energy core glowing brighter by the second. Sir, they're locking onto us, Reyes shouted. Then we don't give them time to fire, Holloway replied. Divert all power to forward thrusters. We're taking this fight inside. The bridge crew stared. Sir, are you saying we're boarding them? Holloway's expression was grim. I'm saying we ram them. Silence. Then Reyes grinned. Aye, sir. The Valkyrie surged forward, dodging enemy fire as it closed the distance. Behind it, the last remaining human ships followed, a desperate, suicidal charge. The Xel'Thar flagship loomed closer. Closer. All hands, brace for impact. The Valkyrie slammed into the alien warship, metal twisted. Alarms blared. The ship lurched violently, But they had made it. Holloway unstrapped himself from his seat. Boarding teams, move out. They stormed into the alien vessel, weapons raised. The Xel'Thar fought back, but they were unprepared for the sheer ferocity of the human assault. Holloway led the charge, blasting through the corridors toward the energy core. He could feel it, pulsing, alive, the heart of the beast. They reached it. The core was massive, pulsing with raw power. If they could overload it, the entire flagship would be destroyed. Rise worked quickly, setting explosives around the room. 5 minutes until detonation. That's all they needed. Fall back, Holloway ordered. They fought their way out, running for the breach in the hull. The remaining human ships had already pulled back, leaving only the Valkyrie to make the final escape. Sir, countdown at 1 minute. Holloway turned back for one last look at the Xel'Thar flagship. For all their strength, for all their arrogance, they had never believed humanity could stand against them. And yet here they were. He climbed aboard the Valkyrie, sealing the hatch behind him. Get us out of here. The ship disengaged, engines roaring as it pulled away. Behind them, the Xel'Thar flagship trembled. Energy flickered wildly, arcing across its surface. Then, in a single blinding flash, it exploded. The shockwave rippled across space, engulfing what remained of the Xel'Thar fleet. The few surviving enemy ships fled, their morale shattered. The battle was over. Humanity had won. On Titan Reach, the remaining soldiers watched as the sky lit up with the final destruction of the Xel'Thar. Briggs collapsed onto a pile of rubble, exhausted. A voice crackled over comms. "This is Admiral Holloway. Mission accomplished." A cheer erupted from the survivors. They had done the impossible. They had defeated the strongest species in the galaxy. Briggs smiled, bloodied but victorious. Humanity had proven itself, not just as survivors, but as the new apex predators of the stars.